Evan Carter rode slowly across the wide desert as the sun dropped toward the red horizon. His horse breathed steady, its hooves soft on the sandy ground. Evan had spent the past week driving cattle to a distant ranch and selling them, and now he was on his way home with a small bag of coins tied to his saddle. Most cowboys like to ride fast after a long job, eager for rest, but Evan moved at a calm pace. He enjoyed the silence of the desert, the sound of the wind passing over the rocks, and the quiet moments when he could think. He always thought more when he was alone, and every time he crossed this part of the borderland, one memory returned to him, an old memory that lived in the back of his mind like a quiet promise he had never forgotten. Years ago, when he was younger and foolish enough to trust the wrong people, he had been ambushed by outlaws. They took his horse, his supplies, and left him wounded near Apache land. He had believed he would die there. Anyone would have. But he survived because of someone he never expected. A young Apache woman had found him, taken him to a hidden cave, and cared for him. She gave him water, helped him sit up when he could not move, and spoke softly, even though he did not understand her words. She had kept him alive even though her own people were in conflict with settlers. She had risked punishment by helping a stranger. Her name was Alia. Evan had seen gratitude in many forms in his life, but nothing ever came close to what he felt toward her. He had promised her, with his eyes and with the little Apache words she taught him, that he would repay her one day. But she disappeared back into her tribe soon after he healed. Since then, Evan carried that promise in his heart, not knowing if he would ever see her again. Now, as he entered a dusty border town at sunset, he heard a loud noise shouting, angry voices, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the ground. Evan's horse stopped on its own, sensing his tension. He looked ahead and saw a large group gathered near the sheriff's office. The crowd shouted things he could not fully hear, but the tone was clear. Someone was in trouble. Evan rode closer, tying his horse to a post. The voices grew clearer. "Get her inside!" She was sneaking around the ranch. "She's probably spying or stealing, same thing." Evan stepped through the crowd and felt his stomach tighten. At the center of the group, a woman was being held by two ranch hands. Her wrists were tied, her clothes dusty from being dragged, and she stood with her shoulders tense but her head held high. She did not cry or beg. She simply stared straight ahead, refusing to show fear. Evan's breath caught in his chest. He knew her, Alia. Her face was thinner than before, her hair tied back roughly, and her eyes were sharp but tired. She looked like she had been walking for days without food or rest. But there was no doubt it was her. The same woman who once saved his life in a quiet canyon when he was dying on the desert floor. Evan felt the world around him go silent. He saw only her just as she had seen him years ago, when he was helpless and alone. The ranch hands jerked her forward. One lifted a rope as if to frighten her into obedience. Evan's heartbeat kicked hard. He had seen too many moments like this in towns that did not understand tribal people. He had seen what happened when fear mixed with anger. Alia turned her head slightly, and for a small second, their eyes met. She did not recognize him at first. It had been years. He had grown older, stronger, with lines on his face from long days in the sun. But when she looked at him the second time, a spark of recognition lit her expression. Her lips parted a little, as if she wanted to speak but could not find the strength. Evan stepped forward without thinking. "What's this about?" he asked the group. One rancher spat on the ground. "She was trespassing near our cattle. Probably planning to take something. These folks don't come near without a reason." Another man snorted. "We should turn her over to bounty riders. They'll pay good money." Evan felt heat rise in his chest. These men had no idea who she was, what she had done, or how much courage she carried. They saw only a tribal woman they thought they could treat as they pleased. Alia stood still. The only emotion in her eyes was a quiet exhaustion, like she had been fighting the world alone for too long, and finally had no strength left. A man raised the rope again. "Maybe she'll talk if we scare her a bit." Before the rope could swing, Evan pushed his way through the crowd and placed himself directly between Alia and the men. "Stop." His voice carried enough force to make several people step back. The ranch hand frowned. Move aside, Carter. This doesn't concern you. Evan kept his body firmly in front of Alia. He could feel her behind him, silent, tense, watching him with confusion. She had saved him once, and now the moment had come for him to do the same. It does concern me, Evan said quietly. You're not hurting her. The ranchers exchanged irritated looks. The sheriff stepped out of the office with a tired expression, noticing the tension. Evan, the sheriff said, don't get involved. This is a simple matter. The ranch boys think she took livestock. She didn't, Evan replied, with calm certainty. You don't know that. I do, Evan said, looking directly at Alia. I know her. The crowd murmured. People whispered, surprised. Alia watched him with wide, uncertain eyes. A rancher stepped forward. If you know her, then you can pay what we're owed. Evan knew the man didn't care about the truth. He cared about money. The tone in his voice made it clear he wanted to punish someone simply because it made him feel powerful. Evan had seen that kind of man before. He took a deep breath, lowered his gaze, and then looked up with a steady expression. All right, Evan said. I'll pay. Everyone fell silent. The rancher blinked. What did you say? Evan spoke louder, making sure everyone heard him. I'll pay. Whatever she supposedly owes. But she goes with me. The entire crowd stared. The sheriff looked surprised. Even Alia seemed stunned. She had never expected to see him again, let alone hear him defend her with such certainty. The ranch hands laughed at first. Then they realized he was serious. He loosened his coin pouch from his saddle and emptied its contents into his hand. It was more money than most men carried. The ranchers leaned in. Their eyes widened. Greed softened their anger. Money always did. The sheriff finally spoke. If the ranch accepts payment, then the matter is settled. The men hesitated only a moment before nodding. The money was too good to refuse. Evan stepped forward, took out his knife, and carefully cut the rope, binding Alia's wrists. His movements were gentle, as if he feared hurting her. When the rope fell away, Alia slowly brought her hands together, rubbing the sore skin. She looked at Evan with an expression he could not read, fully gratitude, shock, and something else he could not place. The sheriff turned away. The ranchers pocketed their money and walked off with grumbles, but no one challenged him again. The crowd slowly dispersed. Alia stood beside him, unsure if she should speak, unsure if she should stay. Evan turned to her slowly. It's all right now, he said softly. You're safe. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she whispered something in her language, something soft. Something that sounded like a memory brushing against him. He did not understand the full meaning, but he understood the feeling, recognition, a bond they had never spoken aloud. He guided her toward his horse. Alia moved with slow, careful steps, weakened by days without proper food or water. Evan helped her climb up behind him. Her hands rested lightly against his back, trembling slightly. As they left the town behind and rode into the open desert, Evan felt a familiar emotion in his chest, a promise returning to him, stronger than ever. He didn't know where this road would take them. He only knew he had done what he was meant to do. The woman who once saved his life was with him now, and he intended to protect her, just as she had protected him. The sun set behind them, and the desert carried them forward into the quiet night. Evan guided his horse through the open desert as the sun slipped behind the mountains, leaving the sky painted with orange and purple shades. Alia sat behind him, holding his shoulders lightly to keep her balance. She was weak, tired, and her breathing was slow, but she stayed upright. Evan could feel the strain in her movements, and he rode carefully so the journey would not drain the last of her strength. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It felt like a space filled with memories that both of them were slowly trying to understand. The wind blew across the dry land, carrying the scent of sagebrush. Evan kept his eyes forward, but he could feel Alia watching everything around them, alert even in her exhaustion. After an hour of riding, he felt her grip loosen slightly. She was slipping. Evan stopped the horse and looked back at her. Her eyes were half closed, her face pale from hunger and fatigue. "You need water," he said gently. He helped her down from the saddle. Alia's legs wobbled, and Evan held her steady, careful, and respectful. He took out his canteen and offered it to her. She hesitated at first, as if unsure she was allowed, then took it with both hands. She drank slowly, letting the cool water touch her dry throat. Evan watched her drink, remembering how she once held a wooden bowl to his lips in a quiet canyon. When she finished, she handed it back with a faint nod. Evan gave her a small piece of bread and dried fruit from his saddlebag. She ate in small bites, clearly not used to food after days of hunger. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and looked up at him. He could see gratitude in her eyes, soft and sincere, but also confusion. She seemed to ask silently why he had helped her this much, why he had stood against a whole town for her. "We should keep moving," Evan said softly, not wanting her to feel pressured to speak. "My place is close," Alia nodded, and he helped her back onto the horse. This time she leaned against him more, trusting his balance and warmth. After another hour, they reached a small wooden cabin near the foothills. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, showing that Evan had left a fire burning that morning when he began his ride. His land stretched around the cabin, a quiet place far from trouble. A small creek flowed nearby, and a few cottonwood trees stood tall around it, giving shade during the hot days. Evan helped Alia down from the horse again, guiding her toward the cabin. She looked around with careful eyes, taking in the surroundings. The cabin was simple. One room, wooden walls, a small bed, a stove, and shelves filled with supplies. It was not much, but it was safe. "You can rest here," Evan said gently. "No one will bother you." Alia looked at him, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak. A quiet sound escaped, almost like his name. But she stopped herself. She stepped inside and sat down on the edge of the bed, her posture still guarded, as if years of hardship had taught her never to relax too quickly. Evan lit a lamp and warmed some soup over the stove. The cabin filled with a soft, comforting smell. When it was ready, he handed it to her. She cupped the bowl carefully and took slow sips, letting the warmth spread through her tired body. Evan sat across the room, giving her space but staying close enough in case she needed help. As she ate, the silence between them grew lighter. She finally spoke in a quiet, steady voice. "You remember?" Her English was limited, but her meaning was clear. Evan nodded. "I never forgot," he answered. "You saved my life." Alia looked down at the bowl, her expression unreadable. When she looked up again, there was a mixture of sadness and relief in her eyes. "Many seasons have passed," she said slowly. "I thought the same about you," Evan replied softly. "I never knew what happened after I left the canyon." Her hand trembled slightly around the bowl. Evan noticed, but he waited patiently. She spoke again, after a long pause. "My people were moved," she said with effort. "Soldiers came. Many ran. Many lost. I went with my small family. Then, storm took them. Not soldiers. Not people. Just storm." Evan felt his chest tighten. He did not ask for more. He knew some stories were too heavy to be spoken all at once. "I'm sorry," he said gently. Alia nodded once, accepting his sympathy without pity. She finished her soup and placed the bowl down. Evan stood and offered her a clean blanket. She hesitated again, then took it and wrapped it around her shoulders. He could see how thin she had become, how much hardship had shaped her since the last time he saw her. "You can rest," Evan said quietly. "I'll keep watch." Alia looked confused. "Why you help so much?" Evan leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. "Because you helped me when I needed it. And I promised myself that if our paths ever crossed again, I wouldn't let anything happen to you." Her eyes softened. It was not easy for her to trust people outside her own, but something in his voice touched her. She lay down on the bed, pulling the blanket close. Within minutes, she fell into a deep sleep. Evan sat in the chair by the lamp, watching the shadows move across the cabin walls. The night grew cold, but the fire kept the room warm. He thought about the years between then and now, about the cruel luck that had taken her from her people, and the strange luck that had brought her back into his path. He didn't know what the future held. He only knew one thing: he would not fail her. Morning came quietly. Evan stepped outside to fetch water from the creek. When he returned, Alia was awake, sitting on the bed with her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked stronger already. Her eyes followed him as he set the water down. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice carried more strength than the night before. Evan nodded and offered her a small bowl of berries and bread. She ate slowly, her gaze moving between the food and the man who had stood up for her. After breakfast, she stepped outside the cabin, letting the sunlight touch her face. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, as if trying to remember what peace felt like. Evan stood beside her, not speaking. Hours passed. Alia helped gather water, even though Evan told her she didn't need to. She moved quietly, gracefully. Even in her weakened state, she found some plants near the creek and used them to make a small herbal paste for Evan's old scars, proving she still remembered the healing ways of her people. Evan smiled when she handed it to him. By afternoon, the quiet peace around the cabin was broken. A soft rustle came from the edge of the trees. Alia froze for a moment, her eyes scanning the distance. Evan reached for his hat but stayed calm. A lone Apache scout appeared on horseback, holding a white cloth of peace above him. He rode closer, his eyes locked on Alia. When he reached them, he spoke in her language. Alia's face changed instantly, shock, then hope, then relief. She stepped forward and answered him quickly. The scout nodded several times. Evan watched, unsure but glad to see her speaking freely again. Alia turned to him, her expression soft but filled with emotion. "My people. Some survived," she explained. "They look for me. Scout says they found a safe place. They want me back." Evan felt both glad and sad. He had wanted her to be safe, but he had grown used to her presence in his home, even in such a short time. Alia walked to him slowly. "You kept your promise," she said in gentle English. "You saved me." Evan shook his head. "I only did what was right." Alia looked into his eyes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. She reached out, placed her hand over his, and held it gently. It felt like a thank you that words could not fully express. The scout waited. Alia stepped back, adjusting her blanket. She climbed onto the scout's horse with grace, holding the saddle firmly. Before they left, she looked back one last time. "You will be remembered," she said softly. "Among my people. Your name will be spoken with honor." Evan watched them ride away until they disappeared behind the hills. The wind blew softly around him, carrying the fading sound of hoofbeats. He stood alone in the quiet desert morning, knowing he might never see her again, but also knowing he had kept his promise. And in the wide halls of memory where old debts are kept, a new kind of peace settled inside him. He turned toward his cabin, the place where he lived in silence, now filled with a memory he would carry for the rest of his days.